I'm so glad to see all of you here, and I'm particularly delighted to see that the rain has not come forward. And as I was driving out here, my radio stopped to give me a weather alert, high winds in about within 5 miles of where I was driving, which was down Harding Road. And it didn't seem very windy to me, so why I was getting these weather alerts, I'm not sure. But hopefully the wind and the rain will not come until tomorrow, and we'll have one more day of beauty here. You know, the past couple of days at Middle Tennessee is just about as pretty a place as it gets. And, you know, the dogwoods are just now beginning to open, and it really is a lovely time to just inhale the beauty, and particularly in the places out here in Bellevue where you can see the Highland Rim and kind of get the glimpse of that. It's really is going to be quite stunning. So I hope that we'll have some days of beautiful spring and not torrential rain that wash all the blooms off the flowers very, very quickly. Right off the bat, I have a question for you all that I don't know the answer to, but I will find out before next week. Someone who lives here in Bellevue asked me who Collis Jean was. And does anyone in here know who Collis Jean was? Well, I will find out the answer to that, but I do not have a clue who Collis Jean was. It could be an early settler. It could be a developer. I mean, some of the streets, as they have been developed, have named the streets for their family members, their children, their mother, their father. So I don't know who Collis Jean was, but that's the thing that makes history so interesting, is there's always one new question to try to see if you can find the answer to it, and it's the pursuit, it's the search that is always so much fun to me. Now, I want to go back where we were last week when we were talking about the settlers coming in these two different groups, the Robertson Party overland and the Donaldson Party coming on these flat boats, big rafts. This is David Wright's painting of what one of these rafts might have looked like. As you see, they are very difficult to steer. There's basically no steering of these things. And when they got to the Ohio River, they had to go upstream, as I mentioned last week, by tying a rope to the next tree. Somebody would go up the shore to a tree, tie the rope, and then they would pull themselves up and then take the rope and tie it to another tree further upstream. And, you know, that's really quite remarkable, particularly when you consider that in the Donaldson Party were the people that were considered to be less vigorous. They would be people that were, yes, there were some men, but mostly they were men that were in those days quite elderly, over 50. John Donaldson being one of those. I think he was 51 or 2, but he was not a youthful person in his mid-30s as James Robertson, and the hardier of the men were walking. Yes, ma'am?
She cannot hear you. Are you using...
Could she move up here? Would you like to move up here?
Yeah.
Why don't you move up here? I've got a microphone on, but I'm happy for you to come up here, and you can sit right here by Fred. Y'all come on up.
No, I can hear.
Y'all are like the back row Baptists back there. And so, yes, getting here for the Donaldson Party was quite challenging. They ran out of salt. They had not ever expected to be on the water as long as they were, because they thought that James Robertson was going to meet them at the Muscle Shoals, which he attempted to do in a January snowstorm and never found the Muscle Shoals. So think about the communication you have right now, the devices all of you have in your purse, your pocket. It may have left it in the car, but you have have a device that you can communicate with your children, your brothers, your sisters, your friends. You can communicate with anybody at almost any time. And so here we've got not just a blackout of communication, we have months of a blackout, and you don't know whether these people are alive or dead, and at what point do you say they're not coming? So I'm totally convinced that when the Donaldson party did sort of start straggling up the Cumberland River from the mouth of the Cumberland, where it flows into the Ohio there near Paducah, Kentucky, that the people who were the most surprised about the whole thing were James Robertson and the men who had come with him. And so the first job, of course, they had after a very brief reunion was to secure some food for their family members and to get some kind of shelter from the elements. They planted corn and a few other things that they brought along the way. They tried to plant some things that they could grow and cultivate, but primarily in the beginning they relied on a diet of a lot of things that you could kill. In other words, animals. That was the primary source of their diet until they got some crops actually growing here. And when the Donaldson party arrived, today is April the 11th. They got here on April the 24th. So I'm sure they saw this beautiful place, lots of lush plant life all over the area, all over the hills, wild game plentiful, and they must have been really excited to get here. And so, as I mentioned last week, these people came for the land. They came for the opportunity of land. Land equaled independence in the 13 colonies, and the 13 colonies in 1780 are still fighting the Revolutionary War, but they are about to end the war, and Great Britain will recognize their independence, and we will have 13 United States. So the people get here, and they know they've got to have a little order here. James Robertson is clearly the leader of the crowd. As I mentioned, he was in his mid-30s, but he was a man that drew respect from everyone. People really respected him. And the interesting thing about this is that he was working, as was John Donaldson, for Richard Henderson, a North Carolina land speculator who had such a big vision of creating his own colony, Transylvania, north of the Cumberland, up into central Kentucky, and he had hired Robertson and Donaldson to come over here and survey this and plant some people, plant a little mini colony, if you will, here to get people living here so that no matter who won the Revolutionary War, you would have people living here and he could legitimize his claim. Now, the people who joined Robertson on this were offered land, but they were ultimately going to have to pay Henderson some amount of money, sort of a deferred payment plan, so to speak, when they got settled in here and began to grow crops and live independently. The amazing thing about Henderson was he wasn't with Robertson, who had gotten here in late December. He wasn't with Donaldson. And sometime shortly after Donaldson's party arrived, who should arrive here but Richard Henderson? And we know very, very little about him. He came by land. He did not come on any kind of a boat or conveyance of that sort. He probably had been up into Kentucky where there were some settlements already and had probably gone there to check on them and then came straight down from there. But he appears here about a week after Donaldson and his group have sort of gotten situated, as much as you can get situated in the wilderness. He has gotten here, and so they know they have to have some organization. they have to have some rules because really, if you want to know the truth of it, they are breaking the law. The people who had gone up into East Tennessee and settled in Upper East Tennessee had violated the Proclamation of 1763, saying no settlers can go across those lines. So they knew they had to have some rule to keep every horse thief or deserter from the British Army or deserter from the American colonial army from coming over here and wreaking havoc. So Henderson had joined a surveying team that was surveying. There were several different surveying teams trying to identify North Carolina's border all the way to the Mississippi. Because even though the Parliament of Great Britain didn't want North Carolina to settle people over here, North Carolina saw its western boundary as the Mississippi River. So the line between North and South Carolina, when they had been divided, was 36 degrees 30, and so the idea was you will survey all the way to the Mississippi River. Now, as you know, if you look at a map, there is a little hiccup in the line right there at the land between the lakes. And Nashville is full of stories, some of which are true and some of which are not. And I know that many of you have told me that you read many years ago the novels of Dr. Alfred Leland Crabbe. And he was a novelist, and so some of the things, although the historic characters in his books are historic characters, some of the embellishments he puts on the stories may have been part of his work as a novelist and not a historian. But these books are much, much loved. And the one, Journey to Nashville, describes this in great detail. It's a very entertaining story. And so one of the stories that a lot of native Nashvillians know and think is right is that one of the surveyors got drunk, and that's why it had that hiccup in it. But the fact of the matter was, it wasn't that the surveyors were inebriated. Another team started at the Mississippi, coming down from Illinois, and started at the Mississippi. And surveying was as precise a science as there was, but it wasn't totally precise. And so they were about 12 miles apart over there when the team going from the Mississippi eastward got to the Tennessee River, and the team going westward from North Carolina, the Appalachians, to the Cumberland River. And so that's where the hiccup was. Daniel Smith, who will become a very important character in Tennessee history, particularly the founding of the state, claimed property on the Cumberland River in what became Sumner County. But he was here fairly early, not with the Robertson Party, but he was a surveyor and may well have come with Henderson, who was surveying. He may not. We don't know much about Henderson's activities at all. But
did
yes.
Henderson finance Robertson and Donaldson? Did he pay them?
The question was, did Henderson finance Donaldson and Robertson? No, this was all what you would call bartering. And the bartering is, we're going to give you the choice land, you get to pick, and they will be paid in kind. That was the way things were paid. When he paid the Cherokees for this purchase, the Transylvania purchase, when he paid the Cherokees for the land, he paid them with about 6 wagon loads of what you and I would just call stuff. There were, I'm sure there were iron pots, but there was no money really exchanged. Occasionally, over the past 30 or 40 years, somebody has found a piece of Spanish coinage here in Davidson County that goes back to the early settlements, but there was really no money to be exchanged here. And so he was going to charge everyone else at least something for their land after they got established. But you get yourself established so that you can claim the land on my behalf. And Henderson comes along here, and he sees that many of these settlements are mostly on the North Carolina side of the line that had been drawn for the boundary of Transylvania. His soon-to-be, he hoped, colony and state never happened, but then some of them had already moved across the line, and the line was the Cumberland River. So, for example, East Nashville today is considered to be north of the Cumberland River. Coming south, where downtown Nashville is actually south of the Cumberland River. So there were people already spread out, and why did they do this? Simply because they could. And they were very eager to get themselves established here, at least for the foreseeable future. So Henderson comes along. He knows that back in North Carolina, there's a new governor. North Carolina, like the other 12, have declared themselves to be an independent state. And the new governor's name is Abner Nash, who happens to be a friend of Richard Henderson. In fact, Abner Nash had a relative who was fighting in the Revolutionary War at the time, but his relative had been a law clerk for Judge Henderson. That was how you became a lawyer. Now, I want to say a word or two about the things that these people had. And if you really want to read about daily life, I highly recommend these two books. Seed Time on the Cumberland is a book about the actual coming of the settlers, and this one, Flowering of the Cumberland, really describes very beautifully how the people lived. And what you learn when you read these books, Harriet Simpson Arno wrote these many years ago, probably in the 60s. I guess I could look in my book and tell you exactly what the copyright date here is on this book. But she wrote these books. In 1963, they were first published, and they are really entertaining to read. And you read about how the women lived. Now, first of all, the women did not have trunks full of lovely clothing. They wore what they owned. And in the winter, you layered more and more on, and as the weather got warmer, you took it off. That was just the way it was. Nobody on the flat boats had extra spare clothing. You layered it on, you layered it off. And that was what everybody had. The men had only the basic kinds of clothing too, and no wardrobe in case I get wet and need to change into dry clothes. The shoes, as you probably know from studying the Civil War, had neither a right shoe or a left shoe. They were made out of animal skins, and they were not measuring to see if your feet were so wide or so long. They were just kind of making do with folding these shoes up and making them as you needed them. Now, what did these families bring with them in terms of material things? Well, they all had one big iron pot. They generally had a utensil or two to stir that pot. The first people who came did not have implements with which to eat, which we all call silverware, no matter what it's made out of, but they did not have tools to eat. People ate mostly with their hands. It was strictly survival of the fittest. They had knives for butchering the animals that they killed and ate, but they had very little. They had brought very little because they had very little. A few of the families undoubtedly had a Bible but not necessarily all of them. Anything printed was quite expensive, and so they did not have reading material. And one of the women on one of the flatboats was James Robertson's sister, Anne, and her husband had died in an accident over in the Watauga settlements in East Tennessee, leaving her with 3 small children. So she joined her sister-in-law, Charlotte, coming over here to relocate into these settlements. And the story is, and some of this I'm pretty sure is true, that she entertained the children that were on these mini flatboats when they would tie off to the coast at night. She would use a stick or some rudimentary tool to carve letters into sand along the sides of the river. Some think they might have had some kind of little box that held the sand. Somebody has to make the box for you to have a box, so whether that is true or not. But supposedly she gets a lot of credit as being the first school teacher here in Nashville, and so all of the school teachers need to pay homage to her for at least seeing that these children got some knowledge of letters and words structure. But it was basically nothing that they brought. The only thing that they had, in addition to their children, that was truly precious: seeds. They brought seeds because they were going to plant here, and the men had brought corn. But anything that you want that grows, that if you of course have kept a garden. Everybody kept a garden for eating. You of course hoped that your roots from your potatoes and turnips would last you through the winter. And so they had seeds, but otherwise they had nothing else. So here comes Richard Henderson, and he is reunited with the 2 men he has hired. I think he came as much as anything just to see how his project was doing over here. He was, as I said, friends with Abner Nash, the new governor, so he says, we need to get things rolling here to legitimize ourselves. So he drafts a document of order. I call it a document of order just to have some basic rules here in this established group of land claims he has put here. And so what they're going to do in the Cumberland Compact is basically agree to have some order. And, you know, you go back to the Mayflower Compact that was signed before those folks got off the boat at Plymouth, and it basically is an agreement that we will have some order. And what this really had in it were 3 basic things. One, you're going to have some men who will serve as judges, because if somebody does break the law, there's going to be disagreements between people. People are people, and there's going to be disagreements, so you've got to have somebody to settle disagreements between people. Particularly, I think the biggest disagreement people might have would be over land claims. And as a result of that, they're going to have this group of judges. They're going to also have a way to establish their personal land claims, and this was very important to Richard Henderson because he wanted to make sure that he got paid for his claims when these people got established, and he really was very much a businessman more than anything else. And a little bit later, they will create the office of clerk of court. They will have this court, the county court, when it becomes a county, and they will appoint a clerk to write all of these things down. But the signers of the Cumberland Compact, which depending on whose book you read, they about 250 or so signers of the Cumberland Compact. The Cumberland Compact, portions of it are down at the Tennessee State Archives. It is a very, very fragile document. But one of the interesting things about these 250 or so men that signed it was that they were all literate, with the exception of one who was only able to put an X for his name. So these people did have some education of some sort to be able to write their name. Now, some of you actually may have known Stanley Horn. He probably died in the 1940s, perhaps, I'm guessing, so that is just a guess on my part. But he was a very interesting person. He was a collector of Tennessee antiques and artifacts. He was a collector of books. He wrote some books that were not novels, they were historical books. He was very interested in trees. His property and the house that he built at the corner of Woodlawn and Bowling, if you know where that intersection is, he had somewhat of an arboretum there on his property. Staniel Horn described the Cumberland Compact in this way: a sort of regional counterpart of the Constitution of the United States, a Bill of Rights, and incidentally, a business contract between Richard Henderson and Company and that company's prospective tenant land buyers. So they are looking to the future. They are looking to continue these land sales and bringing more people in as things settle down. Excuse me, the pollen is really in my throat today. So Henderson knows they need to name this whole gathering of people something, and so he suggests the name of Francis Nash, who was Governor Nash's brother. And Francis Nash had been killed fighting with the North Carolina militia very early on in the Revolutionary War up in Pennsylvania. And so this is another politically astute move. Name this place after Francis Nash, and it will eventually become known as Nashboro. Now, one of the older books that I have at home referred to the renaming it of Nashboro as being because the colonists were still fighting the Revolutionary War against Great Britain, and the people who came over here were on the side of the colonies and the men that had signed the Declaration of Independence to make themselves independent, and they did not want to be British, they wanted to be French. And another book that I have, another old book, says, oh no, they knew that this was the French lick, and so they decided to go with the Nashville because of the French. So it was Nashboro. Nashboro is the name of a small town in England. Ville is the name of a small town in France, I am told. And the thing about Tennessee is we're a hodgepodge. You've got Murfreesboro, Jonesboro, you've got Clarksville, Fayetteville. You've got a little of everything here. So I just think it really was just whatever sounded good to the people who were making the name for the town. But here, this is all a very risky thing. And above all, it's dangerous. Now, Robertson, on his previous encounter here, had not really seen any Native Americans. So he thought this was a peaceful place. Some of the early settlers up in Sumner County, Casper Mansco, for instance, who ended up there about approximately where Goodlettsville is, on Manskers Creek, he had seen some Indians or two. Some of the Long Hunters had seen Indians or two, but Robertson himself had not seen Indians here. But they began appearing almost as soon as the Donaldson Party arrived and Richard Henderson got the Cumberland Compact signed. they just appeared out of the tall, there was a lot of cane here, and there still is a lot of cane in some parts of the county, but downtown in downtown Nashville, there was a large stand of cane that flowed along a creek that they named Cane Creek. Several places have a creek, states have creeks called Caney Creek, but this was called Cane Creek in the beginning, and Indians would appear out of this cane and look around and mostly didn't shoot, mainly because as one writer said, the fact of the matter is they were much better, their accuracy was better with a bow and arrow than with one of those old muskets, because the muskets had such of a kickback that your aim was never precise. And so, nonetheless, the Indians may have done some shooting, but very, very early on, within a few months, Peter Gill had been hit in the head by a ball shot out of one of the Indians' guns, and as John Cotton described this in his narrative about the Cumberland settlements, he said, poor Peter Gill was struck in the forehead by a ball and fell off of his horse with his life blood gushing as if a fountain. They loved descriptions in those days. So meanwhile, from time to time, the men would start fighting back, and sometimes they killed the Indians and sometimes they didn't. This happened over and over, but the event of all of this that gets known quite regularly is the event that becomes known as the Battle of the Bluffs. But Indian attacks began almost immediately, because here, unlike the French traders, unlike the long hunters coming in to hunt, these people are here to stay. They have brought women and children and domesticated animals, and these people aren't just going to come in and stay a little while and take the animal furs they've either killed or they have traded with the Indians for and take them and leave. These people are here to stay. And so this really intensifies the danger of being here, and the population will really shrink very, very dramatically, very quickly. And so here is the route that these people had taken just to get here. They had come, as I mentioned last week, overland up through, let's see if I can get the cursor up here, up through the Cumberland Gap and down this direction to this Salt Lick right there. And here were the Donaldson party coming in this direction, coming along this way. So between them and any settlements to the east are almost 300 miles of wilderness. And the Cumberland Plateau is the Great Wall of this area. It is a barrier. And so what is going on over in the Watauga settlements up here in Upper East Tennessee, while these people are trying to claim the land? And they are in Watauga under some pressure from North Carolina, who acknowledges that they are there and citizens of North Carolina. They are under some pressure to send some men to fight in the Continental Army. You will refer to your American history classes and remember that one of George Washington's very biggest problems as commander-in-chief was keeping soldiers in the field, because he had to rely on the 13 states now calling themselves colonies. He was having to rely on them to provide men. You were in the state's militia to provide yourself and your community defense, but many of these states, you know, after this war has dragged on for so long, they don't really have a lot of men they can call on to call up for service. And so we assume that the men left in the Watauga settlements, which would include John Sevier and some of the Carters and others, they were under some pressure to go join the North Carolina militia. By this time, by 1780, the British had begun to change their strategy. They had initially thought that all the troublemakers were up in New England, where they honestly probably were, but they were not having success in getting those states to quit fighting, and George Washington was able to kind of keep them on the run, so to speak, and his generals beneath him, they're not exactly winning battles, but they're not really losing either. So the British decided to focus on the South because they knew there were so many loyalists living in the Carolinas. So the British have a southern strategy that they develop in about 1780, and troops will be sent into Charleston, and the plan is that they will get the support of the loyalists. In other words, they won't encounter so much opposition from the local people living in the Carolinas, and thus they can get those states in the South to give up, and thus the whole plan of independence will collapse. Well, they did come in, and they did win some battles and take Charleston, and the plan is that they might move a little bit westward towards the Appalachian Mountains. The Cherokees, who are living in the Appalachians, have realized that they are better off with the British winning this war than with the colonists, the Americans, as they call themselves, than the Americans winning, simply because the British don't want to take their land to the degree that the Americans were already taking their land. So one of the thoughts about the British strategy was that they would get the Cherokees to fight with them on their side. And indeed, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, the Cherokees had attempted to attack the Watauga settlements, but they had not been successful. They had been repelled in the summer of 1776. So now the British are coming in a sort of, I guess I would call, across South Carolina in a northwesterly fashion. And word comes to the men remaining in the Watauga settlements that this army is headed our way. And so they decide they've got to make a decision as to what they're going to do. They have these land claims. They are reluctant to leave their wives and children there for fear of Indian attacks as well as military attacks. And they have a meeting at Sycamore Shoals, which is one of those rocky places up there, in late fall of 1780. Now, just to kind of get your timeline straight, the Donelson Party has arrived, the Cumberland Compact has been signed, but there's virtually no communication between these two pockets of settlement. So the men have a meeting at Sycamore Shoals to decide whether to unite themselves together and go off and try to meet the British Army before the British Army gets across the mountains, which is what they decided to do. And this painting is down at the State Museum. If you haven't been, again, I'll give you a little sales pitch. You really need to go, even if you just go several different days and just do one little period of time at a time. When you go, it's free. And there's abundant parking, and it is such a source of great pride for us here in Tennessee now that it is open. So they gathered and decided that they would, in fact, march off across the mountains to fight the British. And they, of course, are Scots-Irish mostly. John Sevier was not. He was a French Huguenot, but mostly Scots-Irish. And so a local Presbyterian minister, they're not much on going to church, but they do like these ministers to come in and start schools. So Reverend Doak gives this very famous sermon called The Sword of Gideon, and it is militaristic in every sense of the word. O God of battle, arise thy might, avenge the slaughter of thy people, confound those who have plot for our destruction. Crown this mighty effort with victory and smite those who exalt themselves against liberty and justice and truth. Help us as good soldiers to wield the sword of the Lord and Gideon. Amen. So it sounds very much like something that could have come out of the Old Testament, because, there's a lot in the stories in the Old Testament about David and the various military battles he fought and others. And so the men march off to meet the British, and it's really rather a successful thing that gets recorded in the history books. They cross the mountains. The British have one of their crack divisions stationed in the west, and they are on this little hilltop of a sort that they called King's Mountain. It's right on the North Carolina-South Carolina border. It is no taller than some parts of the Highland Rim here in Davidson County and going north from here especially. But Patrick Ferguson is there, and he's on what I would call almost a plateau or a ridge. In other words, these Watagans, which are calling themselves the Over Mountain Men, or that's what the Indians actually call them, these men who have appeared to attack this location on King's Mountain are going to have to get up the side of this ridge in order to attack. But apparently after 3 efforts to get up on the top of the ridge, they got up there, and once they got up there, hand-to-hand fighting and everything, and among the casualties of this battle was Major Patrick Ferguson himself. And so the British will eventually, keep moving along, going back up in that sort of northern fashion for another year or so before they will finally have the surrender of General Cornwallis to General Washington at York. On the York River. The Battle of Yorktown is what it's referred to, although the general saw the French Navy out there in the Chesapeake Bay, and there was not much of a battle there, but there was a surrender. A surrender of Cornwallis did not mean that the war was over. But for Cornwallis, it was over. He was ready to go back. And so it will take the British 2 more years, not of fighting or skirmishing, but to finally get to the point that they will agree to recognize their 13 colonies, now former colonies, as 13 independent states. But everything that's going on east of the Appalachian Mountains, the people living over here isolated in the Cumberland settlements, they are going to know very little, if anything, about what is going on, because news simply doesn't come across the mountains. And what is happening to the folks here is a time of you would almost call it terror, because the Indians are attacking in the dead of night. They are attacking without any kind of warning, and the settlements are really destabilized very quickly as these Indians continue to attack the settlers, and there is great fear, so much so that many people are dying, but also in addition to the many people that are dying, you have people like the Donaldsons who had had a son killed, and after that son had been killed, they really decide that it's time for us to get to a safer place. Some people just left. The Donaldsons went back up into the safety of Kentucky for a little while and then came back, and but it was a very, very difficult time for these folks. So the battle that we know the most about is the attack on the stations that were here on this side of the river. In January of 1781, there had been an attack at Freeland Station, if you go to where the Worthen Bag condos are now on 8th Avenue, there's a historic marker in the street there for Freeland Station, and the Indians had attacked there in January, and 2 men were killed there. And it was so dangerous that many of the women and children were actually moving around from station to station, trying to find the safest place at all. Now, one of these people who has now appeared in these settlements is John Cotton. And John Cotton kept a diary of sorts. Some of these diaries are part diary and part memoir. For example, John Donaldson, who kept a diary on the flatboats, and it is, there are remnants of it down at the State Archives. We think that one of his sons probably transcribed it and finished it of sorts, but I do have a transcription, and Caroline and I are working on a website that's going to have the transcriptions of these documents as well as all of these maps for you and everybody else to use and look at. But John Cotton also kept a diary, wrote a memoir. We're just not sure how long the time passed before he described this historic event that will be forever etched in our history called the Battle of the Bluffs. This is one of the frescoes in the outer office of Governor Bill Lee at the state capitol, and it has been there. They were done in the 1950s, so every governor has used this same outer office, and this is a artist's rendition of the Battle of the Bluffs. Now, of course, I do think that Dr. Crabb probably influenced this painter here, because as you see very prominently there, Charlotte Robertson, always a clean dress, and all of these women who were pregnant nearly all the time or breastfeeding a baby, they all had nice little waists, which I don't know how that happened, but nonetheless, Charlotte looks sort of clean and genteel, and she is letting the dogs out. And this becomes a story that she is the heroine of the Battle of the Bluffs. Now, we do know from John Cotton's diary that the story of Charlotte Robertson letting the dogs out is not accurate. And I will pause here to tell you that my students at Vol State, no matter what words of wisdom I speak, they are convinced that the song, Who Let the Dogs Out, was about the Battle of the Bluffs here. And let me repeat, don't go home and tell your children or grandchildren what you learned in your history class and that was that song, because that is absolutely not the case. But nonetheless, it is an interesting story. So the Indians start making some noise in the middle of the night. It is April the 2nd, and the Indians are dressed, as it appears, in full war paint, according to Mr. Cotton's memory of this. And at all of these stations, the danger was so high that they had to have sentinels or guards all night long, every single night, around the station, because just one torch thrown in would burn these things very quickly and very immediately. So one of the sentinels sees 2 young Indians that he sees painted in war paint. They are firing the guns, but they're laughing and taunting the guards, just trying to set some kind of a trap. In other words, we're trying to lure you out. And so the idea is that they're going to get the men out, and then they can kill everybody else. And so one of the people in the group with Robertson, who John Cotton reveres. He sees him as a brilliant man, and I think by all accounts, he was the ideal frontiersman because he was not easily excited or spooked. He understood the dangers, and he understood what he thought was going on. So here is young Captain James Leeper, who is in the fort down at Fort Nashville. And women and children are down there, as well as the dogs that they use to hunt. And Leeper is young and inexperienced, and James Robertson, at 37 or 8 years old, is mature and experienced. That's younger than my two children, so that gives me pause to think of James Robertson being that young. And Leeper says, "Oh, let's go, let's go, let's go." And James Robertson is trying to say, "No, it's a trap. No, it's a trap. We need just to stay here." But finally, after Leeper is just convinced that they need to go out there, Robertson and about 20 men go out to see if they can challenge the Indians and scare them off. So this is what Cotton said as he remembered it. "We bade our wives and children farewell and mounted up. I expected never to see mine again. We rode out of the gate with Jamie," that's James Robertson, "in the lead. The two Indians were at the edge of the clearing eastward, and when they saw us coming, they waved and vanished into the wood going toward the Cane Creek." Now, they waved and vanished, meaning come chase us. This is the trap that James Robertson had been afraid of. And Leeper is running, galloping, however he was moving himself out there to chase these Indians into the cane. And Robertson's trying to call young Leeper back, and Leeper just doesn't hear a word he's saying. So, of course, with Leeper not paying any attention, the other 19 men feel like they've got to go protect Leeper. And this is what Cotton said about that. "A score of Indians rose up out of the tall cane alongside the creek and laid a heaving fire on us for which we were not the least prepared." Meanwhile, the Indians are getting shot at by these men. One of the men who was considered the best shot in the settlements here was John Raines, who was quite a master with his old musket and could load it and run at the same time, which I understand is quite a feat to do. So Cotton said, "I crawled on my belly through the brush till I found Jamie and told him what I had seen. I wanted him to know. Jamie called for all to withdraw while we tried to look at the scene and see what could be done." Okay, so the men make a run for the fort. And one chance to run was while they had gotten off their horses and the Indians are trying to capture their horses. And so they are running for the fort, and the Indians are, just as expected, trying to catch the horses because they desperately loved to take horses from these people. And so, according to him, someone, we don't know who, opened the gate, and well, you know what happened, he says. The ravening horde of dogs ran out and flew at the throats of the Indians. Now, I rather doubt that these were that kind of attack dogs, but nonetheless, they did create some chaos. And then he goes on to say, "Such a sight has never been witnessed, for the confusion and noise is beyond words. Men and beasts rolling together on the grass, screams of pain and cries of fear. Hit by a bullet, Cotton fought off the Indians with his sword, and he tried to get young Leeper inside. Leeper got hit. He was dragged inside by young Cotton and died in his wife's arms. Thus ended the Battle of the Bluffs. but it didn't end the Indian fighting. There's another fight. This book opens with the attack at Buchanan's station and the intrepid Sally Buchanan there in the station while their fort is being attacked. They will continue for several more years. It will not be easy. By May 1781, a year after the Cumberland Compact had been signed, only 1/4 of the population remained. Many had been killed. Some had actually died of natural causes. One of the children on the flatboats was one of James Robertson's children, Lavinia, who was about 2 years old, his daughter. She was with her mother, Charlotte. She made it to the reunion at what became Fort Nashville, but then she died. And so, you know, the children were very, very frail, and but people persevered. And James Robertson, he goes back to North Carolina in 1781, trying to get the North Carolina legislature to just say the Cumberland settlers can claim their land. Because, you know, they're still in this kind of, do we own it or are we not? Are we going to get to stay here? And North Carolina's legislature wasn't even in session when he got there because of the fighting of the war going on. So Robertson comes home in January of 1782 empty-handed, and when he came home, he must have wondered if anybody would be left in the Cumberland settlements. The stalwarts were still here, but they're pretty much confined to one station. Many of the other stations have been abandoned. Cattle have been killed. The food supply is dramatically depleted. They are barely getting along. And so it is about this time that they start saying, maybe we need to try to get the Spanish to help us. And they start thinking about that. But the Indian attacks continued for many, many years. Now, I want to show you some maps that I think really describe what happened to these Indians more than any other thing that I can say. Yes?
What was the station that was left?
Nashville, Fort Nashville.
Can you explain what station is?
Oh, yes, that's a good question. What is a station? I use the words interchangeably between station and fort. It is just a place where people living outside, if this bell were rung, could get into for safety. And so there were numerous families in and out of Fort Nashville, but the idea is you pick your land, you stake your claim, and you go out and build your own cabin on Richland Creek, for example. And you will, but these are military, or let us just say safety shelters for sure, that you are to go in case of attack. So that's another really excellent question. These maps were done by the Department of Geography up at the University of Tennessee, and I really love looking at maps, and these are some of my very favorites. You won't be able to really recognize, read the fine print of the names, but you get the idea. The white part of the map, those are the counties that are now in this area in 1791. We have 4 counties in East Tennessee and 3 here in Middle Tennessee. All of the black on this map is reserved for the Indians. Now, Robertson had gone to North Carolina once trying to get North Carolina to recognize these settlements, and nobody was home, so he goes back after the Treaty of Paris is signed in 1783, and North Carolina created a county. A county is an official arm of state government. And you would be surprised how many people in Tennessee that are adults don't know what a county is supposed to do. But a county is the way that you reach the state government and interact with the state. and the state reaches you for purposes of collecting taxes. So all counties have to be created by the state. And so Tennessee has had a lot of kind of Hatfield and McCoy fights within some of these counties, people getting mad at each other. And so Tennessee today has 95 counties, which because of the geographic size, we have more counties than many states who have considerably larger geography, because mainly we've wanted a county. We want the state to put services here. And the good example of that is Sumner County, which half of Macon County and Trousdale County were part of Sumner County, but they wanted their own county. And when I started teaching at Vol State in 1995, we had a particularly bad winter that year or the year after that. And so the people living on the north side of Sumner County in Portland and Westmoreland felt that the school board was controlled by the people who lived in Hendersonville, and the people who lived up on the ridge in Portland and Westmoreland felt that they were having school when it was too dangerous for their children to go to school, because Hendersonville had said we're opening the schools. And so there was a movement up there to create a new county called Highland County. And it appeared that they had some momentum going for that, but the Sumner County Court and the powers that be sort of reconfigured the school board districts so that Westmoreland and Portland each had representation on the school board, and that sort of quelled the movement to create a new county here. But as I was saying, North Carolina recognizes this in 1783 after the war is completely over, and North Carolina creates one big Davidson County. But then Davidson County will be cut into 3 counties: Davidson and Sumner and Tennessee. And already we're way south of the Cumberland River. Now this line, the invisible line there between Tennessee and Davidson County and Indian Territory, is this mostly invisible ridge, but it is called the Tennessee Ridge or the Tennessee Continental Divide. It's a divide. And the way it is that it runs more or less sort of the route of the Duck River, but and Harpeth too, but it is a line between where the Tennessee flows into Kentucky and the Cumberland, and the water on one side flows to the Tennessee and the water on the other flows to the Cumberland River. So that is the Tennessee Divide. There's a marker for it down on the Natchez Trace. I've been down there many times and cannot see it. I just am looking and looking, and I do not see that I'm on a hill anywhere. I've been up to the land between the lakes and also when the leaves are off the trees and can't find it. But there is that line. So we were already not where we were supposed to be. And this area, we talk a lot about the Cherokees and the hostile Cherokees, the Chickamaugans, but keep in mind there are also creeks down in Alabama, and West Tennessee has the Chickasaws, and they were using this area as their hunting ground. So there are lots of Indian attacks over the years, and James Robertson, as I understand it, learned some Indian language, and he seemed to be the negotiator. So the Chickasaws chief, Piamingo, came in and negotiated with Robertson on occasion. There are 2 different places here in town. One, it used to be over there in that Murphy Road area called the Treaty Oak. The tree was finally destroyed in the 50s in some kind of a storm. But the story was that Robertson and Piamingo sat under that treaty and signed a peace treaty between the settlers and the Chickasaws. There is another spot of that sort over close to the intersection of Nolensville Road and Thompson Lane that they call Flat Rock, but Flat Rock has been developed all around. There is no rock there to see, and that is supposedly a spot where negotiations took place. But the Indian attacks continued. Now, from American history, you know that what the 13 now states thought they wanted didn't work. They are 13 little independent colonies, now states. They're 13 independent countries. And they have this document, you know, it's kind of a friendship agreement because they needed to fight the British. And so it is a confederation that they have created, the Articles of Confederation. And there were lots of problems under this Articles of Confederation because there was virtually no central government. There was a Congress, but it had no power to tax. George Washington was among those who said, this is not working. We've got to do something else. We've got to create a stronger unity. And so as a result of several things that happened, a meeting was called to strengthen the Articles in Philadelphia in 1787 that became the Constitutional Convention. And the Constitution was written and ratified, and in early April of 1789, the Articles vanished, and George Washington was sworn in as the first president of the United States. So now we've got, by 1791, a more stable government across the mountains, and North Carolina is still claiming this, and North Carolina wants to keep claiming this because North Carolina wants to use this, since they don't have coinage or gold in their coffers either. They want to use the land over here to pay their veterans who have come home from fighting in the war on behalf of North Carolina, paying them in land grants, military land grants. And so North Carolina has a significant interest in this, and there are a lot of people in North Carolina who see this as opportunity. One of the men who signed the Constitution when it was ratified, when it was signed to be sent out for ratification, was William Blount. He was a resident of North Carolina. He met and worked with George Washington at the Constitutional Convention, and he and his brother back in North Carolina start buying people's Revolutionary War land grants. Now, how does this work? Well, you know, you live in the middle of North Carolina. Let's say you live over towards between Raleigh and Charlotte, perhaps, and you fought in the Revolutionary War. Your family's there, your wife's family's there, you have a house, you live in a town, and you are being paid with a piece of paper. And it is a deed to land. 640 acres was the standard land grant, but it was definitely not the only measure. Some were 320, depending on your rank in the Army. But you are given a piece of paper for your military service. Well, you know, your wife, if she has heard anything about what's going on over here, you know nobody is going to want to come over here. It's just too dangerous to come. So here comes William Blount and his brother. We'll give you a little for your piece of paper. And these people sell their land grants to William Blount and his brother. Now, there were a lot of other people who got into this business, but Blount and his brother seem to be the most successful. At one point, they have what some estimate as over 1 million acres of land grants in this area that's going to become the state of Tennessee. Now, Congress, now functioning under the Constitution, with George Washington as our president, have decided that they will create an official territory out of this area between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River. This is one of the problems. The states in the east were claiming land west of the Mississippi, and this was not going well, and Congress had come up with a way that we could create territories, not colonies. They didn't want to be colonies. You don't hear about American colonies, but these were the equivalent of colonies, and there would be a process by which a colony could become a state. And so they created the territory south of the River Ohio, and this is what it looked like. Yes, there's Kentucky up there above us, south of the River Ohio too, but this was the Southwest Territory. North Carolina was required to cede, C-E-D-E, their western lands to the national government, and this was created. William Blount, no political slouch. He goes to George Washington. He had never set foot over here. He goes to Washington and asks to be appointed territorial governor of the Southwest Territory. So William Blount gets that appointment. He comes over here. He's smart. He meets with all of the men living in the four upper east colonies of counties of the territory, and then he comes over here, and the men living in the Cumberland settlements meet at the Robertsons' home, if you will, cabin, if you will. And basically what he says is, look, guys, you can trust me. We're all in this together. We want the value of our property to rise. We want to sell land, use land as capital. Let's work together. And so guess what? The population began to boom. And there's continued drama with the Indians, but the Indians will be quelled, and eventually these Indian fights will cease, and there will be over 70,000 people here. And so this means that the Southwest Territory is eligible for statehood. So let's look here at the very end of class at these maps, because look at what, this tells you what happened to the Indians, and you're going to see it's rather dramatic. Okay, Tennessee became a state in 1796. A state needs to provide its citizen services. So look, we go here in Middle Tennessee, from Tennessee, Davidson, and Sumner County, we go to several different counties. Tennessee County became Robertson County for the obvious reason. We named our new state for the Tennessee River. So look at the counties we've got. And in here, right along in here, there's a new piece of technology that's going to change our history. It's the cotton gin, and the cotton has to have a long growing season. So look at this. The Indian Territory in 1800, by 1810, we have gone all the way to our southern border, and it was cotton. Cotton requires a long growing season. Well, the Chickasaws over there in West Tennessee are sitting on some prime cotton property, as are the Creeks in Alabama and the Choctaws in Mississippi. So between 1810 and 1820, what major event takes place that pushes the Chickasaws, Creeks, and Choctaws out? The War of 1812. There was a war within the War of 1812 between the United States and Great Britain. There is a war within that is referred to as the Creek War. And so now in 1820, the only tribe remaining and hanging on are the Cherokees. They have done everything in their power to cooperate and compromise. They own property, some own slaves. They've allowed the missionaries to come in and teach their children. They learn English. They have a constitution. They have a capital, New Eshota, down in northern Georgia. They have done everything. They are hanging on. By 1830, look how fast we cut counties in West Tennessee, 1820. Now look at that. Cotton is king. It's going to make us rich. And it is between this period of time and the Civil War that the population of slaves shoots up in Tennessee, dramatically jumping because of people wanting to make as much money as possible in cotton. So here is 1830. 1830, one of our own is in the White House, General Jackson. And in 1830, he'd been elected in 1828, took the oath of office in 1829, and in 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. The Cherokees are gone. And now that's a kind of a fast forward through all of this history, and so next week I'm going to start with statehood, and we're going to talk about the town of Nashville. Now, in closing here, we don't have any time for questions and answers, but this is what I want you to do. Email me, and I will put my email, I'll go back to the beginning of the slides and put my email address up here, and email me at Carol, and keep in mind, Carol has an E on it. It would make my mother up in heaven unhappy with you if you left the E off of my name, and put the dot and BUCY at nashville.gov. If you will email me your questions, I will begin class next Thursday with your questions. And I'm going to have to leave rather quickly today. I've got to go to Vol State and to attend a meeting. It's that time of year. Education always decides to have lots of teachers' meetings and things of that sort in the last month of school. So I will not be able to hang around too long today. And I think Caroline's going to a Metro meeting herself. So Caroline and I are going to go in two different directions. But I will be happy to hear your questions and answer them. And also, if you have anything to add to the story, let me know, and I will be happy to add your tales to the story as well. Thank you so much for your attention.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.